The language of inaction, how escapist phrases undermine society. Across boardrooms, newsrooms, classrooms, and living rooms, a familiar vocabulary has quietly taken root, one filled with vague reassurances and passive hope. Phrases like, "We can only hope," "It'll all work out," "Let's see what happens." These aren't just harmless optimism, they're a quiet saboteur of progress. Escapist language doesn't just reflect a culture avoiding discomfort. It creates a society incapable of facing complexity or building long-term solutions. This isn't about individual self-help or positive thinking. This is about how societies talk themselves out of acting. The erosion of collective clarity. At a societal level, these phrases obscure truth and distort our collective perception. When officials say things will get better in the face of rising inequality or worsening climate conditions without offering a roadmap, they're not inspiring hope, they're manufacturing a mirage. Mass adoption of this language leads to a form of cultural delusion. It glosses over structural problems with empty reassurance. The public narrative becomes emotionally soothing but intellectually hollow. This leads to poor policies, shallow debates, and delayed reforms. When nations substitute wishful language for deliberate planning, society drifts, directionless and unprepared. The loss of social agency. Phrases like, "It's out of our hands," or "What will be, cultivate resignation. They reshape how people understand their role in society and feed a widespread sense of helplessness. When civic challenges like economic instability or environmental crisis are routinely met with shrugging platitudes, the result is collective passivity. Social movements lose momentum, communities wait instead of mobilizing, voters disengage. The more society internalizes the idea that outcomes are fated, the less likely people are to demand change or hold institutions accountable. It becomes a culture of spectators, not stakeholders. The normalization of delay and dysfunction. Public systems thrive or fail on timing, but escapist language fuels delay disguised as prudence. When leaders say, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," about infrastructure or healthcare, they're not managing resources, they're kicking the can down the road. This normalized procrastination has real consequences: preventable crises, ballooning costs, and policy failures. When entire institutions rely on language that postpones clarity, they rob the public of the ability to prepare, adapt, or respond. The result is a society trapped in reactive mode, perpetually scrambling to fix what could have been prevented. The collapse of accountability in leadership. When authority figures use phrases like, "Let's see what happens," or "fingers crossed," they shift responsibility into a void. These aren't plans, they're disclaimers. This erodes public trust. Citizens expect leaders to offer direction, not deflection. When decision-makers rely on language that sidesteps ownership, they appear disengaged or incompetent. Faith in institutions falters and cynicism spreads. A society that accepts vagueness from its leaders is one that forgets how to demand results. The impairment of social dialogue. Escapist language flattens public discourse. When conversations default to "let's stay positive" or "it's in God's hands," they shut down the uncomfortable but essential work of disagreement, debate, and critique. This weakens democracy. Constructive tension is not something to be avoided, but to be engaged with. Yet escapist language encourages suppression of dissent, masking real pain behind performative unity. A society that avoids tough conversations can't solve tough problems. It can only manage appearances. The reinforcement of cognitive biases. On a societal level, escapist language amplifies dangerous biases in policy and culture. Governments overestimate recovery timelines or downplay threats fueled by optimism bias. Institutions resist necessary change to preserve comfort driven by status quo bias. Entire cultures believe fate or technology will fix what action won't, an illusion of control. Public narratives emphasize success stories while ignoring evidence of systemic failure, a form of confirmation bias. This leads to misallocated resources and cultural myths that blind us to reality. Escapist language isn't just a mirror of our flaws, it's a magnifier of flawed reasoning on a national and global scale. Reclaiming the language of intent and ownership. To reverse this trend, societies must make a conscious shift in public language. We must replace "we can only hope" with "what can we do right now?" Trade "let's see what happens" for "let's assess the risks and take action." Drop "it's out of our hands" for "who needs to be involved and how do we start?" Media, institutions, and education must lead the charge, teaching communication that engages with complexity and uncertainty, rather than avoiding them. Encouraging critical thinking over blind optimism isn't pessimistic, it's how societies mature. And a final thought. The greatest threat of escapist language isn't what it hides, it's what it prevents. It keeps us from naming problems, shaping plans, and rising to the moment. If we want a future of progress, not paralysis, we must be ruthless about the words we normalize. Culture begins with language. So does action. So does change. As a society, we cannot afford to keep hoping things will work out. We must speak and act as if we intend to shape the outcome.